Look, I think the president's doing the right thing. China has been taking advantage of us for two decades. They're stealing our intellectual property, which means stealing our good-paying jobs. And I, frankly, am closer on this issue, not on many, but on this issue with President Trump than I was with Presidents Bush or Obama, because they did nothing to tell China off. Now, China, of course, will respond. But if they know we're strong and we're not going to back off, they will back off. They have far more to lose than we do. They have a $300 billion trade surplus with us. So I'm looking out, number one, for jobs. You know, if General Electric moves jobs to China, they're not unhappy, but my New York workers in Schenectady are unhappy. And so you can't let the international business companies who don't give a hoot about where their factories are govern this. You have to do what's good for the American worker.
In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese MFN tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. Not only do we not have market access, not only do they have prohibitive tariffs, not only are our exports not let in very specifically, but China benefits with at least 10 million jobs from U.S.-China trade. China trade supports 170,000 jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. The fact is that U.S.-China trade is a job loser.
It's also proper for advanced economies like the United States to insist on reciprocity from nations like China that are no longer solely poor countries, to make sure that they're providing access to their markets and that they stop taking intellectual property and hacking our servers.
What is your reaction to the immigration policy? Is it enough?
Well, I think it's well balanced in that they understand that there's a need to keep the doors open for people who legitimately deserve asylum, but that the abuses are so large that unless you undergo major changes, you're not going to be able to sustain it. I think there are a few places that they did not speak to, and I am hopeful that they will, or at least Congress will. The worst is what I call the Sheikh Rahman problem, which is someone's in the country illegally. After 6 months of tracking them down, the INS catches up to them, and all of a sudden that person says asylum and gets another 2 years to go through this. That has not been addressed here, and I think that's a major problem. Also, the many levels of appeal that have been built into the process that make it so long and time-consuming that it becomes ridiculous also have not been streamlined. But overall, I think it's a very good, good first step. The problem, our immigration policies are a shambles, plain and simple. And the word has gone out from one corner of the globe to the other that not only is there a legitimate policy, but there's a policy that's wide open to abuse. That's what they're trying to change here. They have a ways to go, but they've made some progress.
About a third of all of the spending that's done in Medicare, Medicaid, I would imagine a lot of it's in the private sector as well, doesn't go to really good health care, goes to other things. And the real nub of this is how do we wring that waste out, that fraud, abuse, duplication, without interfering with the good care that we want every person on Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance to get. The average citizen knows this happens. How many times when you look at your medical bill, you've undergone a minor procedure, and you see Dr. Smith, $4,000, and you sort of vaguely remember he just waved and poked his head in the door? If we're going to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare, it does mean we're going to cut some of that out. And when I hear my friend Dave Camp say, you cannot cut money out of Medicare, well, we don't want to cut the good stuff that you point out, or add the prevention. But if we're going to, if what Senator Coburn says, that 1/3 of Medicare doesn't go to patient care, you can't just get up there and say, we don't want to cut anything out of Medicare. We want to cut the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. And I think that's where we can find common ground on some of the things you've mentioned, some of the things that are in our bill. And I hope at least in this area we can move forward that way, because Frankly, the Republican Party has always stood for getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. In '97, it was the centerpiece of your program, and all of a sudden this year we're hearing, don't do any of that.
I thank the gentleman, salute him for his work on this, rise in support of the amendment. First of all, Social Security card is used from one end of America to the other as an identification card right now. Who are we kidding? If you want to pass a law and says it shouldn't be, I would ask the chairman and the distinguished minority member of the Social Security committee to pass that law, but let's admit the truth. Everywhere people go, they're asked for a Social Security card. In fact, one way to prove you're a bona fide person who can have a job is to ask for a driver's license and a Social Security card. This is an anti-fraud amendment. All over where we go, people say, well, why can't you stop illegal immigrants or others from coming here? And the number one answer we give our constituents is when they come here, they can get jobs, get benefits against the law because of fraud. And here, the gentleman from Florida has put together the most effective anti-fraud measure we can find without it changing the actions of the government one bit. And we find all this opposition. Ladies and gentlemen of this chamber, what I worry about is that this bill, which started out with good intentions, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, is going to end up being the same kind of thing that the public gets angry with us on. We say we're doing something, and we do nothing. Because every time someone makes a rational and small proposal to get something done, people say, well, what about this hypothetical, that hypothetical, etc. I urge support of this amendment. If you believe you want to stop fraud in immigration, you have no choice but to support this amendment.
How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street. People who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, health care, pensions, throw them out on the street because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants. We move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country.